Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we descend into a place that most of history has already tried to fill with treasure, mystery, and metaphors about eternity. But when you finally get inside, it's empty, quiet. Just stone and space and the slow hush of air that hasn't been disturbed in centuries. Tonight's journey takes us into the pyramids, but not with the excitement of an adventurer looking for gold. No, you're not Indiana Jones. You're someone who showed up late, missed the treasure by a few dynasties, and now has to crouch through a claustrophobic stone shaft that smells faintly like centuries-old limestone and summons someone's bad idea of immortality. There's no map, there's barely air, and worst of all, there's no treasure. This isn't a story about ancient curses or golden sarcophagi. This is a quiet, slightly underwhelming meditation on voids, on silence, and on what it feels like to crawl through a pyramid only to find not much. Maybe a spider. Maybe an echo. So, before you settle in, please take a moment to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background, and together, let's ease into tonight's story. You didn't wake up one morning and think, I'd like to die in a small stone tube, but here you are, knees grinding against chiseled limestone, lamp smoke curling into your nostrils like burnt regret, and absolutely no way to turn around. Backward isn't an option. Forward isn't much better. It's not a corridor. It's a punishment shaped like architecture. The good news? You're technically inside the Great Pyramid. The bad news? So is your panic. The passage you're crawling through was designed either by a sadist or someone who'd never met a person with shoulders. You inch forward, elbows scraping, lamp flickering, and begin to notice things. The air is thick, almost syrupy. Your breath bounces back at you like a disappointed parent. It's warm, but not in a comforting way. More like the inside of a tomb that forgot to ventilate, because that's exactly what it is. You thought there would be treasure. Gold, statues, magical scrolls, a cursed cat with glowing eyes, something. But mostly it's dust and echoes and stone. So much stone. You realize quickly that pyramid robbery isn't the glamorous, whip-cracking, tomb-looting fantasy you were sold. It's a mix of spelunking and dying slowly of your own poor decisions. What you get instead is a crawl space lined with disappointment and the distant hope that someone rich died unguarded and extremely generous. Most didn't. You had to come at night, of course, because even in ancient times, stealing from a pharaoh was frowned upon. More than frowned upon. It was punishable by death, mutilation, or if the priesthood was feeling particularly creative, a lifetime assignment dusting mummy cases in a room with no doors. The pyramids are patrolled. Not regularly, not always, but just enough to make your heart beat suspiciously loud. And if a guard hears a noise and seals the shaft behind you, well, then your best-case scenario is a few slow days of darkness, thirst, and increasingly philosophical thoughts about oxygen. And the traps. You've heard rumors, false floors, sudden drops, curses that work by suggestion alone. Are they real? Maybe not. But when the stones creak under your knees, when a little dust shifts without your permission, you start to believe in things. You whisper apologies to gods you don't worship and promise to return what you haven't found yet. Even if you get past the shafts, even if you manage to break into a chamber, there's another brutal reality waiting for you. Someone's already been here, centuries before you. Millennia, even. You're not the first clever thief. You're the fifth, maybe the 50th. The sarcophagus is shattered. The treasures are gone. Someone even took the bones. You wipe your face, but it's useless. The sweat just smears the dust into something that feels like paste and failure. You can't cry the air's too dry. You can't scream your lungs are busy negotiating with claustrophobia. This isn't a heist. It's an endurance trial in someone else's empty tomb. And still, you keep crawling. Because if you turn back now, all you've got is shame, bruises, and a growing sense that maybe the gods aren't angry. Maybe they're just laughing. You were not born important, but someone, somewhere, thought your handwriting was neat, and that was enough. Now you sit cross-legged in the dust, scratching lines onto sheets of papyrus that curl at the edges like they're already tired of existing. Your job is to record measurements, deliveries, names, stones. Mostly stones. How many were cut today? How many were dragged? How many were lost to the river or to someone's poorly timed sneeze? You thought it would be dignified. Scribes, after all, are respected. They sit in temples. They quote the gods. They receive wine at festivals and sometimes get to correct people without being slapped. But this isn't a temple. It's a construction site pretending to be a holy project. Your seat is a rock. Your ink pot is half full of sand, and every time the wind picks up, your script turns into abstract art. Still, you write. Because someone has to. Because Khufu must know how many men broke their backs today so that his afterlife might come with a skylight. The overseers bark orders. The labourers groan. You just write it all down and pretend that recording a man's suffering makes it less permanent. You carry a small board, your stylus a pouch of ink, and the nagging sense that you were supposed to be more. Not a priest, maybe, but something cleaner. Instead, you spend your days in a pit of heat and stone, and your nights copying your work in triplicate because the overseer doesn't trust a man who wears a robe instead of hauling bricks. You smell like charcoal, sweat and resignation. Your hands are always blackened, your fingernails permanently stained, as if even your body is trying to absorb the weight of your task. Some days the ink runs better than others. Some days it refuses to move at all, like the gods are taking a break from smiting people to mess with your handwriting. You thought the pyramid would rise quickly. You thought it would be done in your lifetime. You were wrong. 5 years in, it still looks like a very expensive sand dune. Workers die. New ones come. You write their names, then cross them out. You're running out of space. The scribal tent, if you can call 4 poles, and a sagging reed matter tent flaps in the desert breeze like it's trying to escape. You anchor it with bricks that should be part of the pyramid, but are currently playing paperweight for your complaints. You were given a clay cup for water and a vague promise of shade. The cup cracked last month. The shade never arrived. And yet, you stay. Because once you start recording something, you start believing it matters. Even if no one reads it. Even if the wind carries it away. Even if someday, all that remains is the smear of your ink and a misinterpreted cartouche that says the pharaoh had 3 noses and a boat obsession. You write. You record. You endure. Not because the pyramid is eternal, but because someone might someday wonder how it got there. And maybe, just maybe, they'll find your name at the bottom of the scroll, half faded, and wonder who you were. Not important, but necessary. You thought you'd find something, a chamber, a relic, at the very least, a moderately interesting crack in the wall. Instead, you find a hole, small, angled, leading nowhere. It isn't large enough to crawl through, not deep enough to echo, and yet it was carved deliberately, precisely, into stone that resists the very idea of chiseling. You stare at it longer than you mean to, because for something that does nothing, it manages to feel important. Some call it an air shaft, but that implies airflow. There is none. You wave your hand gently in front of it, hoping to feel a breeze or maybe the breath of an ancient curse. Nothing. The hole is as still as a monk on a dare. Other people think it's a star portal. That sounds better. Mysterious. Celestial. You squint upward, as if your human eyes can peer through the narrow channel and locate Orion's belt. But all you see is darkness, a black stripe of uncertainty framed in eroded stone. You lie back against the cold floor, cheek pressed to a surface too flat for comfort. You listen, because these places are supposed to have acoustics, whispers bouncing off walls, secrets encoded in sound. But the only thing you hear is your own breath, laboured and just a little disappointed. If this is a cosmic echo chamber, it's doing a very good job pretending to be nothing. Still, you imagine, because that's what humans do. You picture the shaft not as a hole, but as a conduit, a passage for the soul. You imagine a priest, long ago, lighting incense and chanting into the stone, hoping the smoke would reach a pharaoh sailing through the stars on a golden barge. You imagine the pharaoh, already annoyed at the afterlife's paperwork, rolling his eyes and muttering something unrepeatable in Middle Egyptian. But even your imagination has limits. Eventually you have to admit, no wind, no sound, no light, no treasure. Just a tube. It's been here for 4,500 years, and it still hasn't decided what it's for. You wonder if the builders knew either. Maybe they carved it out of superstition. Maybe it was symbolic. Maybe someone just really hated flat walls. There are others. Tiny shafts in the Queen's chamber. Angular channels that aim nowhere in particular. Some end abruptly. Some open into more stone. All of them precise, deliberate, and so far pointless. You try to make sense of it. A ventilation system for ghosts. A stellar GPS. A forgotten joke. You find a false door. It's not really a door, just a doorway shape carved into a wall, leading to solid rock. You walk toward it anyway, because doors are meant to be walked through, even when they don't go anywhere, especially then. You lean against the cool stone, forehead pressed against pharaoh-level indifference. You think about how much effort it took to build these features, carved in the dark, angled with purpose, finished with reverence, for nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Maybe it was never about function. Maybe the shaft was the prayer, the door the offering, the silence the message. Maybe the real treasure was architectural confusion. No, that can't be right. But still, you keep staring, just in case. You arrive at the temple long after the kings are gone. The stone still stands, carved with prayers that few remember how to pronounce, but the tomb itself empty. Looted, maybe. Never filled, possibly. It doesn't matter. You're the priest now, and your job is not to question, but to light the incense and begin the chant. You do not guard treasure. You guard the idea of treasure. You tend to absence with the same care others give to altars overflowing with gold. Each morning, you sweep the sand from the steps. Each evening you place offerings before a door that leads to nothing but stale air and dust older than language. When you were assigned here, you thought it would be an honor. A posting at the foot of the pyramid holy ground, the closest thing to divinity this side of the Nile. You imagined processions, visitors, the occasional goat sacrificed in your general direction. Instead, the days pass in silence so thick you begin to mistake it for a second skin. Even your sandals stop making noise after a while, as if the ground itself has grown bored of being walked on. You still wear the robes. They're white, as custom demands, but the dye has faded to the color of forgotten milk. You still recite the names of the dead pharaohs, though your voice sometimes cracks, and there's no one to correct you. The scrolls say that memory is life, that the name must be spoken or the soul fades, but you're not sure if anyone hears you spirit or otherwise. You clean the altar. You refill the oil lamp. You rearrange the offerings that never rot because they were made of stone to begin with. The fruit has been carved from granite. The bread is limestone. The beer is a painted jar sealed for eternity. Nothing here is real except your devotion, and even that wavers some days. You ask yourself what you're protecting. The past. The illusion of continuity. A very expensive pile of rocks with metaphysical aspirations. You try not to let the questions grow roots. There is no space for doubt in a role this hollow. Still, the rituals matter. Not because they change anything, but because they remind you that time is passing, that the world continues, even if the tomb doesn't. You chant in the morning, chant at noon, chant again when the sun dies quietly behind the desert horizon. Sometimes you add an extra verse just to hear something besides your own breathing. Once, a child wandered in, lost. You offered him water. He asked what you were guarding. You said, everything. He asked what was inside the pyramid. You said, nothing. He looked at you for a long time, then nodded like it made perfect sense. Then he left. And now, you return to the door. You light the incense again. You bow. You speak the name. You repeat it, just in case the wind is listening. Because in the end, you are the priest of nothing, and nothing still expects to be honored. You expected wonder, Are we? Something profound. You were the first visitor in over 1,000 years, a momentous arrival marked not by trumpets or inscriptions, but by your foot breaking the crust of untouched dust. You were told this would be history. You imagined gasps, discoveries, maybe even divine light refracting through some ancient, cleverly hidden gem. What you got instead was a room. Just a room. Stone walls, flat ceiling, air that hadn't moved since the last dynasty collapsed under its own gold. And in the center, nothing. No coffin, no inscriptions, no dazzling relics. Just a rectangular granite box, cold, cracked, and very, very empty. You stand there, letting the silence try to explain itself. You look around, hoping you've missed something, perhaps a false wall, a secret niche, a trapdoor cleverly disguised as boredom. But there is no trick. No hidden passage, just angles and stillness. The walls don't even have decorative ambition. No hieroglyphs, no stars, no painted gods reminding you to behave. It's like someone built a vault for the soul of a particularly quiet brick. You touch the sarcophagus. It's not even a proper lid. Just a heavy, rough-hewn block, slid partially aside long ago by hands just as disappointed as yours. You peer inside, expecting what? Bones? Beads? Dust shaped like royalty? But all you see is smoothness. No sign of a body. No trace of ritual. Just the absence of meaning, perfectly preserved. You try to feel reverence, but it's like trying to weep at the sight of a well-made closet. You tell yourself this is important. You're in the king's chamber, the chamber. But it feels like a hotel room someone checked out of 1,000 years early. The acoustics don't even work unless you hum with very specific, very ancient lungs. You sit down, eventually, on the stone, on history. You close your eyes, hoping silence will start to speak. It doesn't. The pyramid does not whisper to you. The void does not part to reveal cosmic secrets. The only thing you learn is that your thighs hurt and the stone is exactly the wrong temperature for sitting. You had expectations. You thought you'd find mystery, meaning, maybe something that made the centuries fall away. Instead, you're left with this, an immaculate absence, carefully sealed and preserved, as if emptiness itself was the artifact. And then the questions begin. Was this always empty? Was something taken? Was there ever anything here at all? You try to imagine a reason to build something so vast, so precise, only to leave its core hollow. Was it a statement? A decoy? A joke too grand to be funny? You start to feel foolish. You risked heat stroke, collapse, and ancient traps just to stand inside the world's most impressive storage closet. And yet you don't leave. Not right away. Because the emptiness starts to feel intentional. Like someone left a blank page where the reader was meant to write the meaning. And that's the cruel genius of it. You came here looking for a story, and now, without realizing it, you're part of one. You crouch beside the box. Not just any box, this was supposed to be the box. The final resting place of Khufu, God King, builder of horizons, lord of the two lands, and apparently a man who either left early or never showed up at all. The granite is rough to the touch, not polished, not inscribed, not even particularly reverent. Just stone, hacked into a rectangle big enough for a body and empty enough for disappointment to lie down inside. It should feel majestic, but it feels like someone abandoned a very large bathtub in the middle of a very silent argument. You peer into it again, as if a second glance will make the pharaoh materialize, like dust summoned by respect. Nothing. Not even a scrap of linen or a forgotten amulet. If this was ever a tomb, it was a minimalist one. And if it wasn't, well, then it's just a very heavy lie. You try to imagine the day it was hauled in. The sweat, the pulleys, the groaning of wood under weight it was never meant to bear. Dozens of workers shoving this chunk of quarried ambition up narrow shafts, only to drop it in a chamber that would be sealed and forgotten. It took more effort to get this box in place than most people will ever exert in their entire lives. And for what? An empty container, a placeholder for someone who changed his mind. You press your palm flat against the inside, cold but not sacred, smooth but not kind. It's just a box, no matter how many titles its intended occupant may have accumulated. A box with no name carved, no spell inscribed, no soul sealed inside. You begin to suspect that this was never meant to hold a body at all. Maybe it was symbolic. Maybe it was placed here for balance. Maybe someone made a mistake and decided not to admit it. And yet people keep calling it the sarcophagus, with reverence, with conviction, as if naming it something sacred will conjure a pharaoh to fill it. You wonder if the archaeologists felt the same sting of quiet betrayal when they opened it. They expected splendor, jewels, a mummy wrapped in prophecy. What they got was an echo. You imagine the first person who looked into this stone container after centuries of waiting. The build-up, the breath held. The lid slid aside, and then the pause. The silence that follows unmet expectation, the crushing sound of history shrugging its shoulders. You walk around it, slowly, like that might unlock something. It doesn't. It never does. It's exactly what it appears to be, a box too grand to be useful and too empty to be ignored. It dares you to assign meaning. And when you fail, it says nothing. Because that's what stone does. It endures. It doesn't explain. And so you leave it alone. You step back. You take one last look into the granite lie and nod as if you've made peace with it. But you haven't. Not really. Because something should have been there. And it wasn't. You're not the first to look up. The ceiling of the king's chamber is flat, dark, and heavy with silence, but your eyes trace its lines anyway. They said there were secrets here, hidden chambers, pressure-relieving voids, architectural miracles masquerading as nothing at all. You stare at the granite beams overhead, massive slabs stacked like the gods got into masonry. You squint. There are cracks. Faint ones. Not threatening, just enough to whisper that something waits above. You should leave it alone. That's what most people do. But you're not most people. You're someone who has spent too long crawling through passageways that don't go anywhere, examining boxes that don't contain anyone, and pretending not to mind that the highlight of your day was discovering a particularly square shadow. So now you look up, and you wonder, maybe there's another room. Maybe it was sealed off, hidden deliberately. Not to trap thieves, but to protect knowledge. Maybe above this ceiling lies a chamber untouched, unsullied, and still perfectly arranged hieroglyphs painted in gold, stars inked in lapis, a single untouched body swaddled in linen and mystery. Or maybe it's just air. Another void. A perfectly engineered space designed not for treasure, but for weight distribution and heartbreak. You imagine crawling up through those beams, one by one, pressing your face into stone dust, scraping your elbows on history. Not glamorous, not heroic, just itchy, clumsy archaeology with a side of existential doubt. The kind where every stone you pass refuses to say whether you're doing something sacred or something deeply stupid. But still, the cracks. You can't unsee them now. They branch and split like veins across the stone, dry as time, quiet as betrayal. Someone once tunneled above here, you recall, centuries after the fact. They dug through the ceiling, blindly, desperately, hoping for a chamber that would make it all worth it. They found one. Then another. Then another. 5 total, stacked like sleeping thoughts. All empty. Of course they were. They found a name in red ochre. Khufu. Written by a workman, not a god. Not carved in gold, but scrawled like a footnote. That was the prize. A name scribbled behind a stone meant to never be moved. Not treasure. Not revelation. Just proof that someone existed. That someone else had believed in this enough to sign it. You wonder if that's all any of this is. A pyramid, not as a tomb, but as an argument against being forgotten. A mountain made by hand so that time would trip over it and ask, who did this? And here you are, staring at the ceiling, hoping it will blink. Hoping it will admit to something, another room, another layer, another reason to be here. But it doesn't. It just hangs there, vast and uncaring, the architectural equivalent of a shrug. You exhale. The dust stirs. You stare a little longer, then look down again. Because if there's a secret above, it's still not yours. You turn a corner, still inside the pyramid, expecting yet another empty hallway or perhaps a sudden end. Instead, you find a statue, just standing there, quiet, tall, and too confident for something without knees. It's not massive, no towering colossus with cosmic eyebrows, but it's large enough to make you pause. Large enough that your first instinct is to apologize, just in case it outranks you. It doesn't move. Obviously, it's stone, carved from something dark and impenetrable, maybe granite, maybe basalt, maybe the petrified will of someone who wasn't done being important. The face is weathered, the nose chipped, the eyes are doing far too much for two polished holes. They don't glow, they don't follow you, and yet somehow they still judge. They radiate a kind of eternal managerial disappointment, like you've wandered into a divine office without an appointment. You circle it, slowly, like a dog checking to see if the furniture bites. The statue holds something, maybe a staff, maybe an ankh, maybe just its own self-importance. The details have softened over centuries, smoothed by time and the very slow erosion of attention. But the posture remains. Upright. Still. Watching. Always watching. You weren't expecting this. Not here. Not in a place already emptied by robbers, explorers and bureaucrats with measuring tape. A statue still here means one of two things. Either no one wanted it, or no one could move it. Both options are unsettling. One implies irrelevance. The other implies importance too heavy to lift. You glance behind you. Nothing. Of course. You're still alone. You've been alone for hours, but now the statue makes it feel different. Now you feel seen, not admired, not threatened, just noticed. Like the air is thicker with implication. Like maybe you've stayed too long. Or maybe you haven't done enough to deserve your place here. You think about speaking. Just to break the mood. A joke, maybe. Something about it needing a name tag. But your voice dries in your throat. The silence here has momentum, and to interrupt it feels like touching a sleeping god's eyelid just to see what happens. You start to imagine. Of course you do. That's what pyramids do to people. You wonder if this was meant to be a guardian, some symbolic protector of the tomb, a stand-in for a spirit, a watchdog made of rock and permanent expectations. Maybe once, incense burned at its feet. Maybe chants echoed off the walls in a time when statues weren't just leftovers from forgotten beliefs. But now, it's just you and it. You with your scuffed boots, your dusty water flask, your increasingly unhelpful flashlight. It with its perfect stillness, its ancient dignity, its deeply committed silence. And somewhere between you, a standoff you didn't know you started. You walk past it, slowly. You don't turn your back, not at first. You nod because somehow that feels appropriate, and you keep walking, slightly faster than before, refusing to look back. You know it's just a statue, and yet you hope it doesn't blink. You see it by accident, half buried beneath dust and time, a downward slope masquerading as a staircase. It's not grand, no elegant spiral, no heroic angle, just a rough-cut incline pretending to be navigable, leading down into a darkness that looks more permanent than usual. Naturally, you decide to descend. Because the worst decisions always begin with just a quick look. The first step isn't too bad. The second shifts slightly beneath your weight, offering a suggestion of instability. By the third, your knees are already regretting the relationship. The stairs are uneven. The slope is too steep to be lazy and too shallow to be majestic. It's the architectural equivalent of someone mumbling directions into their sleeve. The light from your lamp stretches ahead like it's trying to escape without you. You follow it, because pride is louder than fear. The walls narrow. The air changes. Not in temperature, but in attitude. It smells like something gave up here. Maybe several things. Maybe the concept of forward motion. You keep going, because what else are you going to do? Turn back and admit the staircase won? No, you're already committed. The slope keeps descending, and you start to notice the dust clinging thicker to the floor, like it's trying to protect whatever's below from you. You feel your breath shorten not from exertion, not yet, but from the unspoken realization that you're going somewhere no one bothered to finish. Eventually, the steps stop pretending. The staircase flattens out, and you find yourself in a chamber. if it can be called that. It's more like a basement someone forgot to decorate. No carvings, no colours, just square stone and the uncomfortable feeling that this room doesn't want visitors. You scan the space. Nothing. No sarcophagus, no offering table, no statue waiting to judge your posture. It's as if the builders started something and then walked away mid-thought. You try to imagine the reason. Budget cuts? A change in plan? Divine miscommunication. You step forward, expecting something to creak or whisper or release a dramatic puff of curse-scented wind. Nothing. Your footsteps land with the soft confidence of someone who's already emotionally invested in being disappointed. You circle the room once, twice. You stop. There's a square recess in the floor. A pit, maybe, or just a missing tile. You crouch beside it and peer in. It's shallow, featureless, the world's least successful secret compartment. You sigh. You were hoping for wonder. What you found was a room-shaped shrug. You sit for a moment, because standing feels too optimistic. Your knees pop. Your back resents you. You lean against the wall and feel the pyramid settle around you, as if even the stones are trying to gently suggest, maybe go back upstairs. And so you do. You climb back up, each step now a reminder that the promise of downward mystery is often just a staircase to nowhere. Your lamp flickers again. Your shoulders ache. The dust laughs softly behind you. You don't remember when it got darker, not completely, not suddenly, just subtly, like a quiet betrayal. The lamp didn't go out, it simply gave up a little. The flame shrank, not with drama, but with resignation. Now it casts more shadow than light, and the walls around you seem to lean inward, as if even they want to whisper, you should have left earlier. You retrace your steps, but the pyramid isn't helping. It never helps. Corridors look the same in every direction, like someone designed this place after staring at a brick for 6 hours and deciding there was enough inspiration. You turn left, then right, then back again. Each passage feels familiar, but none feel correct. You begin to suspect you've circled yourself. The sweat returns. Not from heat, though it's warm, but from the slow realization that the air feels heavier now, like it's been used too many times. You blink. Dust floats like exhausted confetti. You say nothing, because saying something would make it real. You just keep walking, slowly, quietly, carefully. Then, faintly, a change. Not a breeze exactly, but something close. A thinner feeling in the air. Lighter, less hostile. You follow it, telling yourself it's not desperation, just navigation. The corridor narrows, dips, then rises again. Your back complains, your knees negotiate, but the instinct to move forward, the only constant you have left, takes over. You round another corner and there it is, a glow. Pale, distant, indifferent, but it's light, not firelight, not lamplight, just sunlight, leaking down from some angled shaft like a half-hearted apology. You stumble toward it. Your ankle twists slightly, but you don't stop. You crawl now, one hand ahead of the other, fingers searching for solidity, while your brain tries to remember how walking used to work. The light grows. It's not warm, not inviting, just there. A slab of pale reassurance cutting across the gloom like a hesitant answer. You squeeze through the last stretched shoulders scraping stone that never meant to let you pass, and then you're out. Not all the way. Just enough. Your head breaks into the day. Your eyes water instantly. The sun, though filtered and distant, hits like judgment. You cough. The air tastes sharp, almost offensive after so long inside. But it's air, real air. The kind that hasn't been politely shared by a dozen dead dynasties. You sit down in the dust just outside the shaft. You breathe. You look at your hands scraped, dusty, trembling slightly, and you think, that was too close. And yet you wonder. You wonder if it would have been better not to leave. You wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed just a little longer. If there was one more corridor, one more chamber, one last mystery waiting for someone too stubborn to quit. But you're out now. And the pyramid, quiet behind you, says nothing. As always. And for now, that's enough. Crawl in was bad. The crawl out might be worse. You have the treasure now, or something close to it, a gilded amulet, maybe a chipped statue, the sort of artifact that once glowed with myth and now just glints like a guilty tooth in your satchel. The weight is reassuring. The consequences less so. You didn't plan for this part. Most thieves don't. The way in always feels longer when you're carrying something. The walls feel narrower, like they know what you've done. You tell yourself to breathe slowly, evenly, but your lungs disagree. They heave like old bellows, pulling in air that tastes like crushed limestone and regret. There's a moment where you pause. The silence becomes something larger, something with shape. You hear nothing, and that, somehow, is worse than hearing footsteps. The pyramid doesn't groan or shift. It just waits, indifferent, unmoved, as if you are not even worth being haunted. The lamp flickers. It's always the lamp, never stable, never steady. You thought oil would be enough. You thought one flask would last both directions. That was the plan. That was always the plan. But now the flame is dancing like it's laughing, and the shadows twist themselves into judgments. You begin to wonder if you'll make it back. Not in a dramatic, panicked way. In a slow, heavy way, like a stone settling into a place it was always going to fall. Your knees hurt. Your shoulders scream. Every movement now is a transaction, pain in exchange for progress. You think about the stories, the ones whispered by firesides and drunken masons. Cursed tombs. Divine punishments. People aging 100 years in one night. You always thought those were just tales told to keep children out of royal ruins. Now you're not so sure. There's a scratching sound. Could be a beetle. Could be your imagination. You freeze. Then you laugh, quietly, because there's nothing else to do. The laughter sounds wrong in this place. Too alive. Too hopeful. You hush yourself and keep moving. You glance again at the object tucked into your cloth pouch. Is it worth it? You can't even be certain what it is. A bauble, a symbol, a ceremonial trinket designed more for ritual than value. For all you know, it was meant to protect the dead. Now it just mocks the living. And still you crawl. You begin to bargain. Not with gods, you're not that desperate yet, but with yourself. If you get out, you'll leave the rest. If you see daylight, you'll tell the others it wasn't worth it. If your knees hold out, if your breath lasts, if the shaft doesn't collapse from the added weight of your stupidity, you'll go back to stealing bread or goats or less symbolic objects. Your lamp sputters again. You hold your breath. The light returns, but fainter now. The pyramid doesn't respond. It never does. You keep crawling, because forward is the only lie you have left, and backward, like the gods you never believed in, has already sealed the door. It starts like any other morning, which is to say, too early, too dry, and too loud with other people's instructions. You wake before the sun, because the stone doesn't care what time it is. The dust is already waiting, as if it slept inside your lungs overnight, and your ink is drying before it touches the papyrus. Another day. Another tally. Another name you'll spell carefully even though no one will ever check. You sit at your post, legs folded, knees creaking like old hinges, and begin the scroll. The day's date. The overseer's mood irritated. The number of bricks delivered several hundred, or at least enough to give the illusion that things are moving. Someone complains of back pain. Someone else is missing. You write it all down, as always, in the quiet hope that order makes meaning, and meaning makes endurance. But something feels different, not dramatic, just thinner. The air. Even the birds seem to have skipped their morning complaints. The sky, when you glance up, feels bruised. Not stormy, not broken, just a little too still. The papyrus catches slightly under your stylus. A tiny snag like the page is hesitating to receive what comes next. You smooth it with your thumb. You continue. Someone's named Senefer, or maybe Sephra, it's hard to tell through the dust caked in your eyes. The workers' rations were delayed. Again, you begin to write that down, and then you stop, because there is a sound. It's distant, deep, not sharp like a shout, but slow and rolling, like thunder having second thoughts. The kind of sound the earth makes when it's about to remember something unpleasant. You pause. So does everyone else. No one says anything. No one moves. Then the shouting begins. Tools drop. People scatter. You stand, scroll still in your hand, and realize your stylus is gone. You dropped it. Or maybe it disappeared. You'll never know. Someone yells about a collapse. Another person is already running toward the river. You don't know what collapsed. Maybe nothing did. Maybe something was found. Maybe a shaft caved in. Maybe the pharaoh himself woke up and said enough. You should flee too. But, instead, you stare at the half-finished scroll. You were in the middle of a sentence. It ends with a verb, half-formed, like a breath held too long. You think about finishing it. You really do. But your ink is dry. The lamp has gone out. And the sky is the wrong color. You gather the scrolls, quickly but gently, stuffing them into a clay jar that smells like onions and old fire. You seal it with a cloth, press it into the sand behind your stool, and cover it with a flat stone. You mark it with a symbol, not a word. Just something you made up. A scribe's small rebellion. A hope that someone, someday, will know there was more to say. And then you run. You do not look back. You never find out what happened. Your scroll ends mid-sentence. Just like your job. Just like your life at the pyramid. You thought it was just another empty chamber. Flat floor, straight walls, ceiling high enough to mock your posture, but not quite high enough to feel impressive. You entered without thinking. You've done this before. A dozen rooms that looked like this. But something shifted the moment your foot crossed the threshold. Not in the air, though the air did seem thinner here, but in the silence. It's a particular kind of quiet. Not the usual tomb silence, that dull, breathable stillness of a room long since exhaled. No, this silence is sharp around the edges. It listens. It waits. And worst of all, it answers. You make a sound just to test it. A cough. A soft one. The echo that comes back isn't loud, but it's too fast. Too certain. Like the room knew it was coming and rehearsed its reply. You say a word. It repeats it. Not lazily, not blurred, but with eerie precision, like an actor who's only ever had one line to perform and has perfected it over centuries. You walk forward. Your footsteps follow you, immediate, clear, unnerving, not one beat behind, not distorted by distance, as if the sound never left you, as if you're stepping on your own shadow and it's learning how to speak. The chamber is empty, no statue, no inscriptions, just stone large blocks fitted tightly, the kind of precision masonry that makes you feel like your own walls are somehow inferior. You whisper, not intentionally, just out of instinct. The whisper comes back with too much confidence. It knows you now. It has your rhythm. You clap once. A mistake. The echo claps back, again and again, not fading, just tapering, reluctantly. You wait. It waits. You hear your own heartbeat trying to find a rhythm the room doesn't already know. Maybe this was deliberate. Maybe the builders tuned this space like an instrument, a place where the pharaoh's name could be spoken, and spoken again, until the walls themselves memorized it. Maybe voices weren't meant to leave here. Maybe this is where words came to settle, to linger, to become part of the stone. You sit on the floor, which feels warmer than expected. Not comfortable, not soft, but occupied. Not with life, no, but with memory. It's the kind of room where you feel watched, not by eyes, but by attention itself. A presence built out of acoustics. You hum. Just a single note. It returns not stronger, not louder, but deeper, fuller, as if the room decided to harmonize with you. You stop. The sound keeps going for a moment. Then it dies, too cleanly. You stand slowly, because rushing in a room like this feels rude. You don't say goodbye. You don't need to. The room already knows your voice, and it will keep it. You come to a wall. Not just any wall, this one has something on it. Not carvings. Not the glorious, chiseled deep reliefs of temples where gods stretch across stone in majestic proportions. No, these are scrawls, scratches. Scribbles, really. Ancient graffiti, if you're being honest. And you are. Because that's what it is. You lean in. The light from your lamp trembles, casting long shadows across names, jokes, prayers, and something that might be the world's earliest attempt at sarcasm. One message simply reads, "I was here." Another adds, "Me too." Someone else disagreed and crossed both out, replacing them with what could be a phallic symbol or just a badly drawn bird. Time is not clarified. You expected reverence. Instead, you find a crowd centuries of fingerprints scratched into the stone like kids carving into a desk they didn't build and barely respect. You smile, despite yourself. Someone came all the way into the pyramid, stood in awe of its massive, eternal silence, and decided to write their name on it. You run your fingers over one of the deeper etchings. The stone is cold, but the intent is warm. There's something oddly comforting in realizing that ancient people were also a little petty, a little bored, a little desperate to be remembered. Not with grand monuments, not always. Sometimes just with initials. Some of the messages are in hieratic script, flowing and elegant, like someone tried to turn language into water. Others are rough, blocky, scratched by hands that clearly weren't trained scribes. And there, just under a crack in the stone, is a single line that reads something like "Khufu is strong." You'd believe it more if it weren't followed by a crude sketch of a man lifting what appears to be a very angry goat. You keep reading. One inscription is just a list of tools. Another seems to be a complaint about bread rations. A third starts poetic, "I serve the house of the rising sun," and ends abruptly, as if the writer either got caught or got bored, or possibly eaten by a falling stone. The possibilities are equally tragic. There's reverence here, yes, but it's diluted with humanity. The kind of reverence that forgets itself long enough to leave a joke, a line, a bad drawing. You begin to realize this wall isn't sacred, it's social. A message board for those passing through the underworld, leaving notes not for gods, but for each other. You wonder if you should add your name. Just a scratch, a mark, proof that you, too, once wandered into this strange stone heart and made it back out again. You don't, not because of guilt, but because somehow it already feels too full. The wall doesn't judge. It accepts. And that may be the oldest magic in this place, not gold, not mystery, but the permanence of someone bothering to say, "I was here." You take a turn, not because it looks right, but because it looks less wrong than the other options. The hallway bends in a way that feels suspiciously familiar, and you begin to suspect you've passed this way already, though there's no mark, no sign, not even a scuff on the floor that might whisper, "Yes, you were here 10 minutes ago," and you still don't know where you're going. At first, it's amusing. A harmless loop, maybe. A trick of geometry. You walk slowly, more out of curiosity than caution, and the walls do what walls do best, they fail to help. Every passage is lined with sameness. Stone fitted so tightly that even your imagination struggles to squeeze between the seams. No carvings. No change in slope. Just corridor after corridor, like someone built an entire philosophy out of repetition. You start counting turns. Left, left, right, maybe another left. You try to form a map in your head, but it unravels faster than your confidence. You pass an alcove you think you've seen before, but this time it seems smaller. Or maybe you're just taller than you were 20 minutes ago. Or maybe the pyramid is shrinking. Or maybe you're expanding. You laugh softly. The sound doesn't echo. That feels rude. You stop and take a breath. The air is still breathable, which is encouraging, but it smells the same no matter where you are, like old stone and quiet disappointment. You check your water flask. Almost empty. Of course it is. Your feet ache in a new place, somewhere near the bones that don't usually complain unless you've been walking in circles under 20 tons of limestone. You keep going, because that's the only move left. The floor tilts downwards slightly now, and you follow it, hoping it leads to something anything other than another hallway that curves gently and betrays you. Eventually you find a chamber. It's not large. It's not small. It's the kind of room that refuses to be categorized. Squarish, perhaps. Featureless. One entrance. No exit. Except you just came in from the entrance. So why does the other wall look exactly the same? You turn around. Walk out. Or try to. The passage looks different. You hesitate. Maybe it's the angle. Maybe it's the light. Maybe it's your brain finally deciding that it's had enough of trusting your sense of direction. You step forward. You end up in the same room. You try again. A different turn. A quicker pace. More determination. Less self-doubt. You arrive in the same space, greeted by the same wall that says nothing and means everything. You're not panicked yet. Not quite. Just mildly insulted by the pyramid's commitment to psychological chess. You sit. You eat a crust of dry bread that tastes like regret and leftover prayers. You drink a drop of water and consider licking the stone for hydration. You do not lick the stone. You wait. And the room waits back. You shouldn't go down there. That's the first thought. It comes uninvited, half-formed, like a memory of falling before you've taken a step. The entrance is narrow, not hidden but hesitant, as if the stone itself is considering whether it should still allow visitors. Sand spills out from the gap, slow and steady, like the passage has been quietly exhaling for a few thousand years, and no one bothered to notice. You crouch and look in. The slope descends at an angle both inviting and accusatory. The sand is deep, soft, and deceptive, thick enough to cushion your footfall, but unstable enough to swallow your balance. You step in anyway, because the worst idea always feels like a good story waiting to happen. The ceiling drops quickly, forcing you into a half-hunched shuffle, like a penitent beetle with sunburned pride. The temperature shifts, not dramatically, just enough to be impolite. The heat clings to you now, damp and muffled, trapped in this low corridor that breathes sand and nothing else. Each step forward feels like negotiating with someone's forgotten curse, someone who asked politely not to be disturbed and buried the door behind metaphor and silence. The walls here are rougher, less intentional, less carved and more abandoned, like the workers who dug this part of the pyramid stopped just before finishing and never came back, or weren't allowed to, or couldn't. The sand grows deeper. Your ankles vanish beneath it. You imagine it pulling you down, grain by grain, like a patient predator too proud to pounce. You pause and glance back. You can still see the entry, barely. Just a lighter patch behind you, like the idea of daylight rather than the real thing. You should turn around. No one would blame you. But instead, you press forward, because now the corridor feels like a challenge. Then the ceiling lowers again, just enough to insult your neck. The passage narrows. The sand rises. You try to step, but the floor shifts under you, soft giving way to softer. A buried stone catches your boot. You trip. You fall forward with more sound than dignity, and your arm sinks elbow deep into the sand. You freeze, half convinced you've landed on something that doesn't want to be landed on. But no hand grabs you. No ancient priest pulls you under. Just more sand. Dry, endless, indifferent. You crawl a few more feet before realizing there is no chamber. No relic. No golden coffin waiting patiently beneath the dunes. Just more of this tighter space, heavier heat, a silence that feels older than stone. It dawns on you that this was sealed for a reason. Not because it was sacred, but because it wasn't worth keeping open. You back out slowly, dragging yourself uphill like a regret reversing itself. The sand hisses against your clothes. Your breath comes faster now, not from fear exactly, but from the clarity that some doors stay closed not out of mystery, but mercy. You emerge again, coated in dust, hair full of ancient static. You don't speak. You just nod, as if agreeing with the architects. Some paths are meant to go nowhere. You weren't supposed to find it. There's no map, no diagram, no dusty scholar sketch in a cracked notebook claiming this passage should be here. But it is. Tucked behind a slightly offset block, half concealed by what might have once been a decorative groove, or might just be the architectural equivalent of a nervous twitch. You brush the stone gently, then push harder. It shifts. The air that seeps out is dry, but it carries a smell that's been hiding for a very long time. Old mortar, forgotten heat, and something faintly metallic, like memory trying to taste itself. You duck through the opening. It's narrow, but it wasn't made for crawling. It's deliberate, purposeful. You can feel it in the slope, too precise to be erosion, too clean to be a mistake. The walls here are closer, smoother, yet undecorated. like someone built this path with great care and then immediately felt ashamed of it. There's no torch residue, no soot-stained ceiling, no sign that anyone's been through here before, or if they have, they had the decency not to leave complaints carved into the walls. That alone is suspicious. Even the most sacred rooms usually have some graffiti, some accidental scuff of humanity. But this is blank. Perfectly quietly blank. You keep walking, heel to toe, steps slow, careful, rehearsed even though you've never done this before. The passage seems to bend in defiance of the pyramid's expected geometry. You try to visualize the structure in your mind, how many chambers above, how many shafts below, but this corridor floats outside the logic you were told to expect. You wonder who built it, and why they told no one, or why no one listened. Eventually you reach a point where the passage narrows just slightly, as if testing your resolve. You lean sideways to slip through, brushing both shoulders against the cold walls, and emerge into a space too small to be a room, and too wide to be a hallway. It's quiet more than quiet. It's acoustically dead. Your own breath feels muffled, as if the stone itself is absorbing every sound you offer. You whisper, and it disappears mid-air. There's a slab in the center, flat, unmarked. Not a coffin, not a table, just there. You circle it. It's seamless, carved from the same material as the walls, the floor, even the ceiling. No joints, no lid, no hinges. You knock gently. It doesn't echo. It doesn't answer. It just exists. You feel like you've interrupted something. You take one step back. 2. The silence doesn't change. The slab doesn't move. But something inside you does a small twist behind the ribs, like your instincts have finally caught up and now politely suggest, this wasn't meant for you. You turn and leave. The passage is still there. The stone you move still slightly ajar. You consider pushing it closed again, sealing it back into the architecture's forgetfulness. But you don't. Not because you want someone else to find it, just because the pyramid will eventually do it for you. And next time, maybe it won't open at all. It starts with a sound you almost ignore. A soft hiss, like breath escaping from behind a wall. You pause, listen, tell yourself it's nothing, maybe just your own footsteps catching up to you. Maybe the pyramid exhaling one of its ancient sighs. But then it happens again. Not louder, just closer. You turn slowly, eyes scanning the hallway behind you. Nothing. Stillness. Stone. Sand. The usual ingredients. You take a cautious step forward, and the noise stops. Another step, and then, behind you, the faintest shuffle. You freeze. The sand is shifting. Not dramatically, not with any urgency, just gently, like something underneath it is rolling over in its sleep. You kneel, not because you're brave, but because curiosity outranks survival instincts in moments like these. The sand is smooth, except for a tiny ripple, a miniature dune that wasn't there a second ago. You touch it. The grains feel the same dry, fine, ancient, but warmer, only slightly, like someone whispered a secret into the floor and the floor blushed. Then it shifts again. A gentle cascade, like sand poured from an invisible hand. You back away, slowly. You want to run, but nothing loud has happened yet, and running from soft noises feels like an admission. You tell yourself it could be an animal, maybe a lizard, maybe a rat. Then you remember that nothing lives in here. Nothing has a reason to. The sand mounds again, this time near the wall. You follow the movement with your eyes, heart kicking softly against your ribs, not panicked yet, just deeply annoyed that the pyramid continues to find new ways to be unnerving. The shifting stops. For a long moment, everything is still. You should leave. You know that. But now you want to understand. You walk the length of the corridor, examining every groove, every slope, every place where stone meets dust. And then, without warning, a small collapse, barely more than a sigh, and the sand sinks an inch or two, like the floor just changed its mind about existing. You step back fast, nearly trip, catch yourself with a hand against the wall. The stone feels firm, stable, but the floor no longer inspires confidence. You kneel again, this time out of necessity. Brush away some of the sand just to see. And there it is, a slit. Narrow, horizontal, like a vent or a crack or a lid. You run your hand around it, edges smooth, stone slightly darker than the rest. Something beneath, maybe hollow, maybe not. You whisper something you don't mean to. The sand doesn't respond. The slit doesn't move. But now you know it's there. You don't open it. You don't touch it again. You stand and back away, eyes never leaving the mound, as if turning your back would activate something you're not ready to acknowledge. And slowly, carefully, you walk away. The sand doesn't move again. But you know it could. And that's enough. You unroll the map slowly, carefully, like it might tear just from your breath. It's older than it should be for something claiming to describe a place that predates paper's paper self. Ink faded to the colour of old arguments. Lines drawn with confidence, labels penned in a script that's either hieratic or someone's best attempt at ambitious calligraphy. You've been following it for hours. And now, finally, reluctantly, you admit the map is lying. The chamber you're standing in does not exist on the parchment. According to the map, this should be a junction, 3 corridors meeting like spokes of a wheel. Instead, it's just stone, no exits, no wheel, no spokes. You check again, turning the map sideways, upside down, diagonally. Still no match. You even try folding it differently, as if the right crease will make everything make sense. It doesn't. You sit down, slowly, back pressed against the wall that shouldn't be there, staring at the hallway that should be a stairwell, across from a chamber that isn't. For a moment, you wonder if you're in the wrong pyramid. You aren't. You triple-checked. You've crawled through its innards like a patient parasite. You know the angles, the slope of the grand gallery, the particular scent of the king's chamber on a humid morning. This is the right place. It's just the wrong truth. The map had promise. A hidden corridor here, a shaft concealed there. Red ink marking places of interest, as though the scribe wanted to whisper across time, "Look here, this part matters." But when you arrived, nothing matched. The measurements were wrong. The landmarks were approximate at best, hallucinatory at worst. Some chambers were too big. Others didn't exist. One area, labelled Treasure Vault, was actually a hole filled with centuries of bat skeletons and regret. You begin to realize something uncomfortable. The map wasn't made by someone who knew. It was made by someone who wanted to know, who guessed, who heard stories, saw symbols, and tried to connect them with lines and hope. You've been following a narrative, not a guide, a parchment of wishes disguised as geography. Still, you keep it. You can't bring yourself to throw it away. It's useless, but it's a kind of companion. At least it tried. You fold it again, carefully, as if protecting its feelings, and tuck it back into your pack. The map may not know the way, but it understands the effort of trying. You rise. You pick a direction not on the map, because now that's all you have. The corridor curves slightly. You don't know where it goes. You don't know if it goes anywhere, but the air moves just enough to suggest possibility, and sometimes that's better than certainty. You find it by accident, not with triumph, not with shouting. Just a dim slope at the edge of a corridor that smells less like mystery and more like rock that's run out of opinions. You shine your light. The tunnel angles upward. That's the first hopeful thing you've seen in hours. It isn't grand. It isn't carved with epics. Just a low, slightly irregular crawl space, angled like someone meant to escape discreetly and never came back to tell the story. You step in. The floor is rougher here. Not polished, not brushed. It's prepared. It scrapes beneath your boots like it resents the idea of direction. You move forward, hunched lamp low, eyes squinting as the slope continues, gentle but persistent. You tell yourself this is the way out. You want this to be the way out. So it must be. But then your balance shifts. You are walking uphill. You were sure of it. The lean of your spine, the pull on your calves, it all screamed upward. But now, it doesn't. The walls tilt in a way that defies your inner ear. The angle of the floor deceives your knees. And somewhere, impossibly, up starts to feel like down. You pause, put a hand against the wall. It feels level. The tunnel hasn't changed, but your body has doubts now. Your chest tightens not from exertion, but from uncertainty. You take another step. It feels wrong. Gravity is playing tricks again, like a host rearranging the furniture mid-party. You crouch lower, instinctively, as if proximity to the ground will stabilize your senses. You begin to notice small carvings, not decorative, functional. Chisel marks still visible, like the tunnel was abandoned before anyone could make it pretty. The corners are slightly uneven. The walls lean just a bit inward, not enough to trap you, but enough to imply that the pyramid is watching, and it's not entirely thrilled with your persistence. Your lamp flickers. Of course it does. You mutter something, not quite a curse, not quite a prayer, just a syllable that belongs to people who are deeply over their own ambition. You kneel to check your pack. One last oil flask. Half full, maybe less. Enough to keep the light burning, just long enough to find the next bad decision. Then fresh air. Not much, just a thread. A whisper through the tunnel's ceiling cracks. It doesn't smell sweet or clean. It smells like desert wind and sun-warmed limestone, but it's different, and that's all it needs to be. You move faster now, nearly crawling, shoulders aching, heart stumbling forward faster than your feet. The incline feels real again. The physics make sense again. And then light, not artificial, not flickering, just pale, washed out, blessed daylight. You reach the threshold. Squint into it. Your eyes sting. Your mouth forgets how to smile, but it tries anyway. You climb out into the sun. You are tired. You are filthy. You are unsure how long you've been inside. But you are out. And for now, up is up again. You weren't supposed to see the plan. Not really. Not all of it. The drawings weren't meant to survive. They were scratched onto clay, painted on plaster, whispered across generations and then lost to fire, flood, or forgetfulness. But a few fragments remain odd angles, lines that go nowhere, notations that reference stars instead of measurements. You study them, spread out on a dusty table under the flicker of torchlight, and realize something unsettling. These aren't just architectural sketches. They're prayers written in geometry. You expected numbers, precise calculations, the cold logic of blocks and balance. What you find instead are symbols drawn with wonder, as if the architect wasn't building a tomb but sculpting a question. A line leads upward, not to the heavens, but to a point just beneath them. A chamber perfectly aligned with the stars rising. A shaft angled not toward airflow, but toward eternity. You try to follow the design. Your fingers trace along the brittle surface of the plaster. The ink, if it was ink, has faded to a soft brown, like memory trying very hard to become soil. There are notations written in a script so old that even the scholars hesitate before pretending to translate. One curve, half-formed, seems to mirror the path of Sirius in the winter sky. You begin to suspect that the architect didn't see the pyramid as a place. He saw it as a message, or a machine, or an equation so large that it had to be built in stone, because no papyrus could carry its weight. You sit back and imagine him the architect, not the pharaoh, not the overseers, the man with ink-stained fingers and too little sleep. He's standing under a night sky, looking up, not down. He's thinking in angles, dreaming in weight. He doesn't see stars, he sees beams, supports. Sacred geometry stretching across constellations like scaffolding across thought. And what was he trying to say? Maybe nothing. Maybe he wasn't trying to speak at all. Maybe he just wanted to align stone with sky, so that someone could look back and say, this was not random. This was not just heavy labor. This was intention, built to outlast the words that could explain it. You look again at the drawings. They don't lead to treasure. They don't promise power, but they mean something. You can feel it, even if you don't know what it is, even if no one ever will. You roll up the parchment gently. Dust scatters. The stars are rising again outside, and somewhere in the sky, a forgotten architect is still building. You climb up carefully, not because it's steep though it is, but because it feels wrong to rush. The stones here are tighter, less forgiving, like they remember every hand that's touched them, and aren't sure they want to be touched again. You reach a small ledge and pull yourself into the crawl space. It's barely a tunnel, more of a seam in the pyramid's memory. Dust clings to the corners like old thoughts refusing to fade. And then it opens. You expected more stone. You expected dust and cold and stillness. And yes, all of those are here. But this space feels intentional in a way that disturbs you. It's not a chamber with a purpose. It's not wide enough to be ceremonial, not tall enough to impress. It is a void. But not an accidental one. A space that was left on purpose. Like a pause in a sentence that changes the meaning of the words before and after it. You lie on your back, staring up. 5 massive granite beams rest above you, stacked like forgotten intentions. Each beam heavier than logic allows. No mortar, no glue. Just precision and pressure and the stubborn will of physics. They call it a relieving chamber, but that term feels clinical, dishonest. As if it's only here to keep the ceiling from collapsing. As if that's all it's doing. You listen. The silence here is louder than in the chambers below. It hums not in your ears, but in your teeth. There's no wind, no echo. But something about the shape of the room holds sound, like it's waiting for a noise worth keeping. You think about the people who sealed this room. Not workers. Not scribes. Engineers, maybe. Dreamers with ropes and pulleys and the dangerous belief that weight could be made to float, if only long enough to slide another stone into place. And why leave it accessible? Why not fill it in? They could have. It would have been easier, but they didn't. They left this gap, this breath, this space inside the pyramid that holds nothing, but means everything. You run a hand along the wall. The granite is rough in places, smooth in others, like it's been sanded by time and indifference. You tap gently. The sound dies instantly, swallowed, not echoed. As if the room is a listener, not a responder. You lie still, no hieroglyphs, no gold, no curse, just a box in the sky, placed inside a stone mountain, above a king's empty chamber. Beneath 1,000,000 tons of stone. It should be terrifying. It isn't. It just is. You see it carved into the wall, neatly framed, perfectly shaped, unmistakably door-like. But it doesn't open. It never did. It's a false door, they call it, which feels both honest and deeply unsettling. You stand before it, staring, knowing it's not meant to move, and yet your instincts keep whispering, push anyway. It's beautiful in a quiet way. Rectangular with horizontal lintels and vertical gems, chiseled from the same limestone that has held every breath of this place for 4,000 years. The surface is smooth, but your fingers can still trace the shallows where paint once clung. Red ochre for life, black for names, blue maybe for the sky. Now all of it is gone, worn away by time and the long patience of silence. You kneel, you lean in. The door is flush with the wall, its edges sharp enough to frame expectation, but not reality. There is no hinge, no handle, no seam, but the symbolism is loud. This was a passage for the car, the spirit. Not for you. Never for you. The dead were supposed to walk through it in ways you cannot. Your hands would never reach the other side. Only your shadow might. You wait. Just a moment. Just long enough to be irrational. Just long enough to hope. The door doesn't open. And yet, you imagine what it might be like if it did. A corridor opening into darkness. A staircase that descends sideways. A library of names no one said aloud in centuries. But it won't happen. It can't. Because it was made to suggest, not to serve. This is architectural metaphor. A trick played in stone. You step back, just slightly, and notice something else. There are others. More doors. All false. All facing nothing. They sit in corners, tucked behind support beams, half hidden in rooms no one visits. Each one identical in shape, different in placement. None of them meant to be used. All of them meant to be seen. And that's the game, isn't it? This isn't about movement. This is about memory. Each door a promise to the dead that they won't be forgotten, that their spirit will have somewhere to go, even if it's just sideways, through a wall that has no other side. You place your hand flat against the center of the door. The stone is cooler here. You imagine it listening. You imagine it pretending. You don't speak. You don't knock. That would be wrong. This isn't a door that welcomes. It's a boundary that teaches. You turn away slowly. And behind you, the door does exactly what it was built to do. It stays closed. You find the staircase tucked behind a sloping corridor that was already trying too hard to seem unimportant. It angles downward, shallow at first, then steeper, with steps uneven enough to feel handmade but deliberate. Your feet fall into the rhythm of descent. The stone grows colder, the air thicker, and somewhere behind your ribs, your breath becomes unsure whether it belongs here. The stairs aren't grand. No carvings, no inscriptions, no welcoming figure of a god to oversee your humility. Just bare steps, worn smooth by nothing in particular, because few ever came this way, and fewer still came back. You count them without meaning to. Each one makes a soft sound underfoot, not an echo, but a suggestion that someone once tried to measure depth with footsteps. You expect a room, or a doorway, or even a turn. But the stairs keep going. You press your hand against the wall as you descend, just to stay grounded. It's slightly damp, not wet, but humid in the way that suggests the pyramid sweats here, deep beneath its own mass. You imagine it sighing through stone pores, pushing out secrets that never made it to daylight. Eventually the stairs end. Not dramatically, not with a flourish, just stop. They flatten into a short landing, which leads into a chamber so small it feels like a mistake. A square box. No door. No passage forward. Just four walls and the unsettling awareness that you've reached somewhere that clearly doesn't care you arrived. You walk the perimeter. Slowly. It takes less than a minute. The walls are unmarked. The floor is flat. You crouch, knock, listen. Nothing answers. Not even the whisper of echo. This room is so silent it makes your thoughts louder. You sit for a moment, resting against the wall, staring across at the point where you thought another hallway might begin. You wonder why the stairs led here. Was it symbolic? A descent into nothingness? A statement about the futility of pursuit? Or was it just a construction error a project started, then abandoned when it was clear that the budget, or the god, had changed? There's no offering table. No niche for statues. Not even a cavity in the wall for a name. It's as if this room was carved only to be empty, then sealed with a long shrug from whoever drew the plans. You stand again. Rub the back of your neck. The air hasn't moved since you arrived. It might never have moved before you did. You take one last look at the chamber, trying to convince yourself you missed something. But you didn't. There is nothing here. And somehow, that was always the point. You spot the shaft while leaning against the wall, trying to decide whether the silence in this part of the pyramid feels more like reverence or just architectural fatigue. It's small, barely wide enough for your arm and angled, oddly, not straight up or down, but diagonally, like it's trying to avoid being helpful. You shine your light into it. The beam stretches for a few meters before giving up, swallowed by the darkness as if embarrassed. They call them air shafts. That's the official term, anyway. But you can't help noticing they don't seem to carry air. There's no breeze. No draft. Just stillness so complete it makes the shaft feel less like a passage and more like a punctuation mark, one carved into the pyramid's body by someone with questions and not enough stone to answer them. You crouch beside it. The angle is precise. Too precise to be an accident, and too inconvenient to be for convenience. Some point towards stars Sirius, Orion's belt. A few others ancient astronomers knew like neighbours. But even then, the connection feels symbolic, not functional. A shaft that points toward a star is not a telescope. It's more like an arrow with nowhere to land. You press your ear against the stone. You don't expect to hear anything. And you don't. But the silence has a texture here, a kind of softness edged with waiting. It's not empty, exactly, just unfinished. Like this channel was carved for sound, but no one ever got around to speaking into it. You whisper something, not a word, just sound. The kind of breath that barely qualifies as speech. It vanishes instantly, without echo, without acknowledgement. The shaft doesn't hum. It doesn't resist. It simply receives and forgets. You wonder how long it took to cut. How many hours some worker spent scraping and measuring and sweating in the dark to make a hole that leads nowhere, or leads everywhere, depending on who you ask. You can imagine the architect standing over the plan, explaining the shaft's alignment in terms that sounded important at the time: divine angles, sacred geometry, maybe a hint of metaphysical airflow. And now here it is in front of you. Real, perfectly crafted, totally indifferent. You lie on your side for a moment, head next to the shaft's mouth. You stare into the black until your eyes water. You know there is nothing in there. You still half expect to see something move, but it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. Eventually you stand, dust yourself off. The shaft remains, like a question too polite to interrupt. You leave it behind without solving it, and that's fine. Not every corridor was made for walking. Some are just there to remind you that movement isn't always the goal. Sometimes it's enough to look. You expect to find it. That oval frame, the car touch, the royal name proudly sealed within looping lines, each one a verbal fortress wrapped around a pharaoh's identity. It should be here, somewhere. On a lintel perhaps, or near the threshold of a chamber. That's how it works. You build a monument, then you write your name on it, in case history needs help remembering who to thank. But it isn't here. You run your hand along the stone. Smooth, plain, quiet. No carved sun disk, no scarab, no reed and basket puzzle, spelling out a king's 1,000-year aspirations. The space where the car touches should sit is blank, not scratched away, not damaged, just absent. As if it was never there to begin with. As if someone made the conscious decision to leave the most important word unspoken. You frown. This isn't a minor omission. This is silence with weight. This is the kind of missing detail that causes scholars to argue for generations and leaves tourists awkwardly underwhelmed. You check the corners, the ceiling, the stones stacked above the door. Still nothing. Not even a faint trace of inscription that time might have weathered down to illegibility. Just wall after wall of functional mystery. You think about Khufu, allegedly the builder of the Great Pyramid. Everyone says his name with certainty. But the structure itself doesn't. Not openly. Not proudly. There's graffiti hidden in one of the upper relieving chambers. Yes, a small red ochre scrawl that says Khufu's gang was here, or something equally casual, but that's not a royal declaration. That's more like ancient construction site banter. So why not inscribe it? Why build something so massive, so mathematically arrogant, and then refuse to sign it? You imagine the architect holding the chisel, waiting for the signal to etch the name in, and the pharaoh just shaking his head. No, let them guess. Maybe he thought the monument spoke loudly enough. Maybe he believed his name had already been etched in the stars, and stone would only cheapen the message. Or maybe less nobly, maybe he wasn't the builder. Maybe he just inherited the bragging rights and let the pyramid speak without reference to its author. You step back, squint, try to imagine what a cartouche would look like here. Maybe a double circle frame. Maybe the falcon god standing tall inside. Maybe nothing at all. You feel a strange kind of humility. Or maybe it's vertigo. The absence presses in, not like an emptiness, but like a question that refuses to blink. You walk away from the wall, slower than before. The blank space stays behind, doing exactly what it was designed to do. It makes you wonder. And wondering, in a place like this, is as close to reverence as you're going to get. You run your fingers along the stone, not expecting to feel anything new, but you do. Just beneath your palm, a groove. Not deep, not elegant, just a faint, uneven line where a chisel once hesitated. It's not part of any design. No sacred geometry here. Just evidence that someone, somewhere, once made a mistake and left it behind. You shift your light and find more. Tiny scrapes, like scars too shallow to heal but too stubborn to fade. Some are deliberate blocks trimmed into place, angles corrected mid-cut. Others are chaotic. A gouge where the tool slipped. A corner chipped and smoothed over. The pyramid is made of precision, yes, but also of corrections. You begin to notice them everywhere. The stones are not perfect. They don't want you to think they are. Between the seams you find wedges still jammed in place, ancient wooden slivers, long dried to the hardness of fossilized bark. They were used to level what couldn't be made level. A trick, a workaround, a whispered confession that even in this temple of weight and math, human error was present and welcomed. You think about the hands that made these marks. Calloused, cracked, covered in dust so fine it became part of the skin. Not priests, not kings. Just workers, probably barefoot, definitely tired, turning blocks the size of sorrow into walls that were never supposed to fall. They worked in teams. They shouted. They cursed. They bled on the ramps. And some of them left behind their rhythm, etched into limestone. You press your ear against the stone. You can almost hear it, the faint thud of copper striking granite, again and again, until shape emerged. 1,000 small hits that no one bothered to record. Because history loves the outcome, but forgets the process. You imagine a worker stepping back after setting a block, wiping his brow, nodding not because it was perfect, but because it was good enough. You imagine him scratching his name somewhere low, where only the wall could see it. You imagine him walking away before the mortar dried. And now you, centuries later, trace that line and call it a mystery. You kneel and run your fingers over a section of particular clumsy workmanship, a lip that doesn't align, a face that slopes ever so slightly off. It's beautiful, in a way that perfection never manages to be, because you can see the trying, the effort, the adjustment, the human beneath the monument. You smile softly. This isn't a tomb built by gods. It's a project managed by dusty people with sore backs and blunt tools and deadlines written in stars. You stand again, and you realize the pyramid doesn't remember the pharaoh. It remembers the ones who built it. You weren't looking for a room. Just a place to sit, maybe breathe without negotiating with angles. But when your shoulder brushes against a crack in the wall, and the dust falls not outward but inward, something shifts. You press gently, expecting nothing. The stone gives slightly. Not enough to open, not enough to groan, just enough to suggest that someone, at some point, wanted to come back here. And then didn't. You push again, and the panel slides not dramatically, but with the grudging motion of an old door that forgot how to be useful. Behind it, darkness. Your lamp reaches in first, spilling light like a cautious rumour. The chamber beyond isn't large. It's rectangular, low-ceilinged, no decoration. Just dust, endless indifferent dust. Not the fine shimmer that dances in the air, but the kind that settles and stays. The kind that means no one's been here in a very long time. You step in. The air doesn't change much. It's stale, of course, but not hostile. Just tired. Like the room itself gave up waiting for anyone to care. You pause at the threshold, unsure whether to call this a discovery or just another room with identity issues. But there's something about it, something quiet, almost watchful. You scan the walls. Nothing. No inscriptions. No niches. Just raw stone. You crouch and rake your fingers through the dust on the floor. It's thicker here, layered, like memory sediment. At first you see nothing, then a shard. Not gold. Not gem. Just a scrap of pottery, the curve of a rim too small to be ceremonial. A bowl. A lamp base. You brush around it. Another fragment appears. Then another. You're surrounded by pieces unlabeled, uncelebrated, utterly unimpressed with your presence. This wasn't a burial chamber. This wasn't a treasure vault. It was a room for something else. Maybe storage, maybe solitude, maybe failure. You imagine a scribe, or a mason, or a caretaker, slipping in here on a day no one noticed, to rest, or to hide, or to forget their name for a while. And the pyramid, ever patient, ever hungry for silence, simply kept them. There's a corner where the dust is disturbed, but only slightly. You walk toward it and find a stone, round-edged and out of place. It might have been a seat. It might have been part of something larger. You sit, and for a while, nothing happens. And that's the point. You breathe. The dust breathes with you. The room doesn't care who you are. It doesn't remember the king, or the workers, or the rituals. It just is. A container of quiet, a pause in the narrative, a chamber where the only thing buried is meaning itself. You leave it as you found it, maybe with one more footprint, and the dust, like always, will cover it soon. You say something just to hear it bounce. A word, any word, it doesn't matter which. Something simple, something safe. But it doesn't come back. It disappears into the air like it regrets being spoken. You stand in the middle of the room, turn in a slow circle, and speak again, this time louder. Still nothing. No echo. No reply. Just the strange feeling that your voice is being swallowed by the stone before it can remember itself. This chamber is small, square, unremarkable by design. No sloped ceilings. No grand galleries. Just flat surfaces that should, by all laws of sound and reason, reflect. But they don't. It's not that your voice dies here. It lingers. Stays close. Hugs the inside of your ears like a conversation you didn't finish. It doesn't fly out into the room and return. It just hovers, personal, unfinished. You snap your fingers. The sound is soft as expected, but it feels muted in a way you didn't expect. Not muffled by distance or cloth, but by something stranger like the air here refuses to carry noise without a reason. You try clapping. Nothing. The sound stays in your skin. You hum, and even that folds back inward. You crouch and press your ear against the stone wall. It's warm. Slightly. Not from sunlight, it hasn't seen light in centuries, but from pressure. From presence. You whisper again. A small word. A name, maybe. The sound doesn't move. It sits in the air between your lips and the floor and decides not to travel. You stand and walk slowly across the room. Each step is audible, but in the wrong way. The sound stays underfoot, doesn't trail behind you, doesn't fill the space. This place doesn't echo, it absorbs. Or maybe it listens. You wonder if it was built this way on purpose. If someone, long ago, decided there should be a room where voices don't leave, where sound stays exactly where it's made, and dies quietly without bothering anyone. Maybe it was meant for prayer. Maybe it was meant for secrets. Or maybe it was meant for the pharaoh himself, so that even in death, no word spoken here would escape his presence. You sit in the middle of the chamber, legs crossed, hands in your lap. You say one more word, soft, uncertain, and you feel it wrap around your throat like a scarf made of thought. Still no echo. Still no release. The word simply lands and stays. Eventually you stop speaking. Because here, silence doesn't wait for you to finish. It just begins. You reach the end without ceremony. No archway. No inscription. No guardian statue with vacant eyes pretending to care. Just a wall tall, plain, unyielding. You place your hand on it, half expecting it to move, to hum, to blink. But it doesn't. It's simply there. The end of the corridor. The edge of ambition. The final exhale of a monument that's run out of things to say. The wall is warm but not welcoming. Smooth but not polished. Built from stone so tightly set that even air seems unsure how to pass. You press your palm flat against it and try to listen. You don't hear secrets. You don't hear anything. Not even your own thoughts, which seem to pause respectfully in the presence of such finality. You step back and look around. The passage behind you is narrow, slightly crooked, as if unsure whether it should have continued. The floor is level, the air dry, the dust arranged in perfect indifference. You pace the small space in front of the wall, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. The most sacred dead ends never feel like mistakes. They feel like decisions someone made without explaining why. You check the stone for seams. You trace the outline with your fingers, hoping for some flaw, a missed line, a shift in grain, a whisper of a door. There's nothing. The surface is too quiet. It doesn't resist. It doesn't offer. It merely exists. You consider knocking, just to see. But you don't. The urge fades before your hand rises. Because this isn't a door waiting to open. This is a wall that means exactly what it looks like, no more. And you wonder why build a hallway that leads here. Why waste time, labor, and stone just to arrive at a full stop. Maybe it wasn't waste. Maybe this wall is the point. Maybe it's here to remind you that not every journey ends with revelation. Some just end. Not with answers. Not with gold. Not with a trap or a priest or a view of the stars. Just with a stone that refuses to become anything else. You sit down on the floor, back resting against the cold edge of a world that doesn't care whether you understand it. You stare at the wall for a while. It doesn't change. You weren't expecting it to. But a small part of you still hoped. And then, something soft happens. Not a sound. Not a movement. Just a feeling. That this is the end. And that's all right. The pyramid has nothing more to offer, and you have nothing more to demand. You stand again, slowly. You give the wall one last look. It does not blink. It never did. You think temple work sounds prestigious, holy, important, a calling maybe. You imagine golden robes, sacred chants, rituals so profound that the very gods pause to listen. What you get instead is a man sitting very still for a very long time, watching a statue that hasn't blinked in 3 centuries, and almost certainly won't start now. He isn't meditating. He isn't praying. He's guarding a presence, a place, or maybe just an expectation. You sit beside him. Not literally, there's no room, and also you'd get in trouble, but in your mind you join him. The granite floor is cold. The air smells like dust mixed with 1,000 extinguished candles. Somewhere outside, the sun is blazing. Here, it's always twilight, not dramatic twilight, more like a hesitant dimness. The priest's job isn't action, it's atmosphere. He opens the sanctuary before dawn, sweeps it without enthusiasm, lights incense that smells vaguely of burned thyme and unresolved tension, then sits. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He waits. And in this waiting, something sacred is supposedly preserved. You think it sounds easy. It isn't. Stillness is heavy, heavier than labor. You try it for 5 minutes and your knees complain. Your back starts folding into new geometry, and your thoughts scatter like startled chickens. He's been doing this for years. Every day, same posture, same silence, same gods refusing to show up on time. People occasionally wander in pilgrims, priests from lower ranks, the occasional noble trying to look devout. They nod, whisper, leave offerings. Sometimes they wait for the statue to respond. It doesn't. The priest says nothing. That's not his job. His job is to be there, like a bookmark in someone else's holy text. A witness whose testimony is never requested. And when the place is empty again, he resumes the quiet. He adjusts his robe by millimeters. He watches the flickering oil lamp on the floor, counting each sway like a clock with no numbers. At midday, he eats a handful of figs and half a loaf of bread that tastes like someone forgot the concept of joy. He chews slowly, reverently. Not because the food deserves it, but because the gods might be watching. Then he resumes his post. There are no miracles, no heavenly voices, just the slow accumulation of presence. The idea that stillness itself keeps the world from sliding off its axis. Maybe he believes it, maybe not. But he's here, every day, while cities rise and fall beyond the walls. And when night falls, he extinguishes the incense, closes the doors, and walks home without a word. He will return tomorrow. Stillness is a job, and someone has to do it. You think it'll be a moment of magic, the lighting of incense. A flick of flame, a curl of fragrant smoke, a transformation from dust to divinity. But when it happens, it's quieter than you expect. The priest bends down, strikes the flint with the same indifference one might use to swat a fly, and touches a thin flame to the base of the dried resin cone. It catches slowly, hesitantly, like it's unsure whether it still believes in itself. The smoke begins in wisps. It doesn't billow or dance. It creeps, a thread of white, reluctant and reedy, rising just high enough to be noticed but not high enough to perform. The smell is familiar and strange, at once sharp like old wood, sweet like dried fruit, and with a bitterness that sits behind your teeth like a forgotten debt. This is the priest's one active moment of the hour, lighting the incense, watching it smoulder, fanning it once, maybe twice, with the edge of his hand. Not to spread it, but to remind it that someone is watching. After that, he lets it be. The rest is up to the smoke. You think the purpose is obvious. Pleasing the gods, sanctifying the room, chasing off bad spirits, or at least bad smells. But when you watch longer, you realize incense doesn't do any of those things directly. What it does perfectly is create the illusion of movement. A slow, shapeless presence in a room otherwise still. The smoke becomes the only thing willing to shift, and in doing so, it distracts you from the fact that nothing else will. The priest watches too, but not intently. He's seen this smoke before, every day. Same resin, same dance, different shapes, same story. You wonder if he reads it like a script interpreting its curls, pretending they say something sacred. Or maybe he just enjoys having company that doesn't ask questions. The smoke drifts toward the ceiling and dissipates slowly. It clings to the carved lintels, briefly outlines the statues, then slips away, disappearing not because it's gone, but because it's tired of being seen. You breathe it in. It scratches your throat slightly, then vanishes behind your nose. The priest doesn't light another. 1 cone per hour. That's the rhythm. Not written in stone, but in tradition. In routine. In the invisible agreement between gods and men, keep the air moving, even if your body doesn't. Eventually the smoke thins to a memory. It leaves a faint stain on the air, like a sigh you can't quite locate. And that's it. The room is no holier than it was before. The gods haven't descended. The silence hasn't cracked. But for a while, there was motion. And that was enough. You notice the table before you notice what's on it. Low, rectangular, carved from something that once tried to be elegant limestone maybe, or a softer cousin. It leans slightly, the back left leg shorter than the others, so everything placed on it lists toward the east like it's trying to leave. On top, offerings. Or the ghosts of offerings. A bowl with hardened residue that might once have been porridge. A crust of bread that has the texture of masonry and the colour of surrender. A handful of dried flowers curled inward like they regretted blooming in the first place. No one's guarding it. The priest doesn't look at it. The gods don't seem particularly interested. But it's there. It's always there. New things appear. Old things vanish. Not because of magic. Not because of divine appetite. But because someone, usually someone lower ranking and underpaid, clears it out before it becomes too obviously tragic. You lean closer. The bread smells faintly of dust and time. The kind of smell that suggests it once had ambition, but has now accepted a quieter fate. The flowers are reeds, probably plucked from the river's edge days ago, when they were still pretending to be vibrant. Now they snap if touched. One of them is stuck to the table with something that might have been honey or grief. The priest doesn't touch the offerings. That's not his job. His presence makes them sacred. His absence would make them garbage. It's the context that matters. A lump of bread in your hands is food. On this table, it's theology. And none of it is for you. That's the part that keeps resurfacing. You're close enough to smell it, close enough to study it, but not close enough to matter. These gifts are for the gods, or for the memory of gods, or for the appearance of having remembered the gods. Sometimes it's hard to tell where belief ends and public performance begins. The people who bring them don't stay long. They place the bowl, the loaf, the flower, with a practiced gesture that says both I mean this and I'm late for something. They bow not deeply, not shallowly, but with the exact weight of someone fulfilling an obligation. Then they leave. And still, the offerings remain. You wonder how many gods have seen how little is left after the people leave. You wonder if the act matters more than the substance. If the gods, assuming they even care, prefer intention over execution. You wonder if the priest wonders too. But he doesn't ask. And the table doesn't answer. The bread stays where it is, a monument to reverence gone stale. And you. You keep watching, the guest of a ritual that has no script for you. You expect the walls to say something. You really do. They're covered in hieroglyphs, lines upon lines of them, stacked like woven thoughts, each symbol carefully carved, each figure frozen mid-myth. They tell stories, or they're supposed to. Gods walking with men, animals judging souls, kings giving offerings to beings who don't eat. It should feel profound. It should feel alive. But as you stand there, head tilted, tracing the curves of the vulture glyph with your eyes, the truth settles in. The wall is not speaking. It never was. The priest chants softly, not to you, not even to the room, really. He chants because that's what's done. His voice hums in a rhythm too practiced to feel sacred. The same lines repeated daily until they lose all sense of meaning, reduced to syllables arranged for the comfort of routine. He's not reading the carvings. He's echoing them, or pretending to. You follow a line of glyphs from left to right, watching as a falcon becomes a scepter, then becomes a reed, then becomes something your mind can't quite categorize. You try to read emotion into it, but the wall isn't offering any. These are not paintings. They do not bloom with color or shift in expression. They were carved to endure, not to engage. The gods do not blink. The kings do not smile. They simply are, permanent, silent, tired of being misread. You speak a word aloud, just one, something simple, a greeting, maybe. Your voice bounces softly, meets the stone, and doesn't come back. You say another. The wall accepts the sound but offers no reply. You begin to suspect that these carvings were never meant to talk back. They were declarations, not dialogues, and your presence is irrelevant. Still, you keep reading, or trying to. The priest doesn't stop you. He doesn't even notice. He's halfway through a hymn to a god with the head of a jackal and the patience of a librarian. You can't tell if he believes the words or just remembers them. Does it matter? You find a small corner of wall where a name has been chipped away. Not cleanly, not gently. Someone meant to erase. Someone succeeded. You don't know who the name belonged to. A pharaoh, probably. A rival, maybe. Whoever they were, their legacy has been reduced to dust at the base of a carved lotus. And that's when you understand. The walls were never meant to respond. They were built to outlast. Carved not for conversation, but for memory. Not your memory. Theirs. You step back. You look again. The gods still don't blink. But maybe they don't need to. They've already said everything they ever will. You arrive before dawn, because that's when it's supposed to begin. Not the ceremony. Not the procession. Just the waiting. The room is still dark, lit only by the stubborn glow of oil from last night's lamp, its wick curling in on itself like a tired finger. The priest is already there, already seated, already silent. He doesn't greet you. He doesn't move. You suspect he hasn't moved in some time. The god, of course, is not present. He never is. But that doesn't stop the ritual. The altar is prepared. The incense is lit. The offerings barely edible, certainly unappetizing, are placed exactly where they should be. A statue sits at the far end of the sanctuary, gleaming faintly in the dim light. It does not stir. It never has. It's carved from black stone, polished until it reflects nothing but its own certainty. You wonder if this is worship or theatre. You wait beside the priest, doing nothing, saying nothing, watching the stillness ripple gently through the room. And slowly, it dawns on you, this isn't a prelude. This is the thing. The waiting is the ritual. It begins with breath. Not chanting. Not action. Just the sound of someone inhaling, deeply, rhythmically, as if trying to coax a god out of hiding with lungs alone. Then comes posture, straight-backed, unmoving. Eyes not closed, not open wide, but somewhere in between. Focused on nothing. Focused on expectation. You try to join in. You sit. You breathe. You clear your mind, and immediately it fills with thoughts about your knees, your back, your hunger, your doubts. You think about what you're supposed to feel. You feel nothing. The priest doesn't flinch. He's waiting. He's practiced. He's trained his body not to expect sensation, but to receive the absence of it. You look to the statue again. The god depicted is unblinking, arms crossed, mouth in a permanent expression of tolerable boredom. You're not sure if the face was meant to inspire awe or simply discourage conversation. Time slips. Minutes. An hour. You lose track. There's no clock here, only the slow consumption of incense and the slight dimming of the outside light, As the sun rises high enough to forget you, no miracle occurs, no wind stirs, no divine voice cracks through the air, but eventually the priest rises. He bows to the statue deeply, slowly, meaningfully. Then he snuffs the lamp with 2 fingers and walks out. You follow, a few paces behind, unsure whether something profound has just happened or whether nothing happened at all. And that, you begin to understand, is the point. Because sometimes in this temple of stone and smoke, the god doesn't come, and still they wait. You didn't think divinity would gather dust, but here you are, cloth in hand, standing in front of a god's feet stone, unmoving, eternal, and brushing away the thin veil of time that has settled on them overnight. The priest says nothing as he hands you the rag. He doesn't instruct, doesn't warn. Just nods toward the statue with the quiet authority of someone who's done this task more times than he's bothered to count. The statue is tall, not towering, not grandiose, just tall enough to make you feel like you're being looked down on, even though its eyes are closed and its mouth is sealed in an expression somewhere between judgment and forgetfulness. You begin at the base, kneeling, cloth folded into a square that immediately absorbs more dust than you expected. The stone is smooth but cold, so cold it feels like it's remembering something unpleasant. You wipe gently, not out of reverence at first, but uncertainty. You're not sure how hard to press. You're not sure if the god will notice or mind or wake up grumpy. But nothing happens. The dust comes away in slow strokes, revealing a faint shine beneath, like a memory trying to resurface. You move upward. The toes are large, worn smooth from centuries of invisible footsteps. You find a small chip on one sandal strap, tucked under the hem of the statue's robe. You wonder if it was damaged in transport, or during a particularly clumsy festival. Or maybe someone got too ambitious with a broom once. The priest begins sweeping behind you. His motions are measured, barely louder than the silence they disturb. It feels coordinated, as if the room has choreographed this moment, one man with a cloth, another with a reed broom, both circling a god who hasn't moved in 3,000 years, but still expects cleanliness. You reach the knees. The cloth is dark now, streaked with soot, incense residue, and something that smells faintly like ancient oil and forgotten intentions. You stop to refold it, and as you do, you catch your reflection in the statue's polished calf. It looks warped, tired, and slightly guilty, as if you've interrupted something, even though nothing has changed. You finish the leg, stand, and consider whether to continue upward. The priest doesn't say no, but his eyes flick briefly toward the altar, a silent cue that above the waist is off limits, unless you're someone with more titles or less hesitation. You nod, step back, bow not deeply, but enough to acknowledge the strange intimacy of having cleaned something that does not breathe. And then the moment passes. The cloth goes back in the bowl. The dust is gone, for now. The statue still hasn't moved, but at least now, if the god decides to walk, the path from pedestal to floor will be spotless. And that, apparently, is your offering. You've walked past it 3 times today alone. The door. Thick, solid, carved into the back wall of the inner sanctuary, framed with symbols so precise they look freshly pressed. You assumed it was decorative, or perhaps ceremonial, but now the priest stops beside it. He places his palm flat against the surface gently, almost apologetically. He says nothing, just looks at you. Not as an invitation, more like a warning disguised as silence. The door doesn't open. It's not locked. It's not jammed. It was never meant to open. Not in the ordinary way. You examine the seams, there aren't any. The stone is cut so tightly, it looks like a single unbroken slab. Only the handle suggests otherwise, and even that seems more symbolic than functional. You run your fingers along its edge, cold, unmoving, dusty with disuse but not neglect. No one forgot this door. They just agreed never to disturb what was behind it. You wonder what's inside. You imagine a shrine, or a sealed chamber with relics, gold masks, ceremonial scrolls, offerings placed too reverently to be real. Maybe even the mummified body of a god statue that was once paraded through the city streets to the sound of drums and tambourines and now waits, eternally bored, in the dark, Or maybe it's empty. Maybe they sealed the space as a statement. A tomb not for a body, but for the idea of presence. You've seen this before. A void that demands reverence. A room filled only with absence, tightly wrapped in symbolism and sandstone. The priest steps away. He won't say what's beyond the door. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he knew once and chose to forget. But his movements are different now, more cautious. He brushes the floor near the base, straightens a tapestry that isn't crooked, pretends to tidy what doesn't need tidying. You ask if it was ever opened. He shakes his head slowly once. You don't ask again. There are rumors, of course. Whispered speculations among lower priests and visiting dignitaries that the door is a seal, not a threshold. That opening it would let something out, or worse, let meaning in. That what's inside isn't a chamber at all, but a concept. Something like divinity or judgment, or the echo of too many forgotten prayers compacted into form. But here's the thing no one wants to find out. The door serves its purpose better closed. It gives shape to mystery. It says, this is sacred, without proving it. And that somehow makes it more convincing. You take one last look. The door still hasn't moved. And it won't. Because here, in the heart of the temple, the most sacred space is the one no one dares to enter. You've lost track of time again. Not because you weren't watching, but because the temple doesn't care. The sun might rise and set outside. But here, inside this slow cavern of stone and smoke, nothing moves fast enough to be noticed. No bells mark the hour. No calls to prayer. Just shifts, gentle ones. A flicker of the oil lamp. A curtain slightly stirred. A shadow that used to fall left now leaning right. The priest does not speak. He hasn't for hours. He walks, sweeps, adjusts, all within the bounds of silence that has somehow become more predictable than any clock. You start to notice it too. The rhythm of things. The way silence grows thicker just before a new cone of incense is lit. The soft pause between footsteps and bowing. The way an offering is placed not with drama, not with devotion, but with the precision of someone checking off a task on a divine checklist. This is the temple's true schedule. Not hours, but silences. Not seconds, but absences. One moment blends into the next not because they're alike, but because nothing interrupts them. You try counting to 60. You lose track by 30. The numbers lose meaning when the only ticking sound is the occasional crackle of a reed broom brushing across a dusty floor. At some point, someone enters. A junior attendant, maybe. You hear sandals on stone, soft and hesitant. No words are exchanged. A bowl is placed down. A brief nod is offered, and then they vanish again. No greeting. No farewell. Just participation in a ritual shaped entirely by knowing when not to speak. You begin to feel the pressure of it, the silence. Not oppressive. Not even uncomfortable. Just heavy. Present. Like a thick blanket you didn't ask for but are now reluctant to remove. You try to say something, just to test your voice, and it catches in your throat. Not from fear. From reluctance. Speaking feels invasive here, like carving your name on a gravestone that already knows who's buried beneath. The priest lights another lamp. Slowly. With intent. The room brightens by half a heartbeat, then dims again as the flame settles. No one reacts. The act is not for drama. It's just the next silence beginning. You sit, back against the wall, watching. Listening. The hours pass. You don't measure them anymore. You simply accept them. And maybe that's the point. To exist inside time without needing it. To let the world unfold not in minutes, but in moments that choose not to make noise. And when the day finally ends, it doesn't tell you. It just fades. The temple remains. Still, dim. Expecting nothing. Offering even less. And the silence, as always, arrives exactly on time. You find the scroll tucked behind a cracked pillar. Not hidden exactly, but placed with enough care to suggest someone once thought it mattered. The papyrus is brittle, curled at the edges like it's trying to roll itself back into forgetfulness. You open it slowly, gently, as if the words might flee if startled. The ink has faded, but the shapes remain, a prayer. Simple. Repetitive. A dozen lines of hope arranged like bricks in a wall no one finished building. You read the first few sentences aloud. Your voice barely rises above a whisper, as though the air itself is tired of listening. The words are familiar. They ask for protection, for guidance, for good harvests and strong suns. Nothing dramatic. Nothing selfish. Just ordinary human needs dressed in ceremonial phrasing. It sounds like something you've heard 1,000 times in 100 different temples, all of them echoing the same quiet desperation. The priest doesn't react. He's nearby, polishing a bowl that has no shine left in it. He hums softly, not a melody, just a rhythm, like a broom sweeping thoughts into neat piles. You wonder if he's heard this prayer before. You wonder if he wrote it. You wonder how many of these requests get answered, or even acknowledged. The scroll doesn't contain any response. You place it gently on the offering table, beside a dried fig and a broken reed pen. There's something mournful about the arrangement, as if the table is hosting a conference for abandoned intentions. The prayer sits there now, just another object among many, wrapped in dust and the suggestion of faith. You imagine the person who wrote it, kneeling on the cold stone floor, squinting in the lamplight, struggling to keep their handwriting steady, while their stomach reminded them how little grain was left. They probably believed what they wrote. Maybe not fully, maybe not with fire, but enough to write it down, enough to leave it behind. And you? You don't believe or disbelieve. You just observe. You feel the hollowness of the space and the quiet insistence that everything here is more about repetition than result. Because prayers in this place aren't about change. They're about persistence. You say the last line aloud again, slowly this time. Let the God remember me, even if I am small. The sound doesn't echo. It lands in the dust and stays there, joining the others. You wonder how many voices have said something similar. You wonder if the gods, if they're real, are overwhelmed, or bored, or absent. You stand, brush your palms together. The prayer is still there. The world has not shifted. But maybe, just maybe, the air is listening. Even if it doesn't answer. You arrive just as the sun begins to rise behind the columns, washing the courtyard in pale orange light that feels more like memory than warmth. The priest is already there, of course. He's always there. But today he's not sweeping. He's not lighting incense. He's not preparing offerings. He's standing at the edge of the sanctuary doorway, looking in like a man deciding whether to say goodbye or pretend it isn't happening. You know what day it is. The temple is closing. Not because of war. Not because of fire. Just neglect. A quiet, bureaucratic ending. The priests are old, the pilgrims few, the donations fewer. The god hasn't shown up in centuries, and the local governor has decided the budget is better spent on grain storage and canal repair. Faith, apparently, doesn't keep the wheat dry. The priest walks inside, slowly, not dramatically, just a little slower than usual, as if each step might be his last, and he wants to give the floor time to remember it. You follow. Not because you're expected, but because you don't want the silence to carry the burden alone. Inside, it's the same as it ever was. The statue stands. The incense bowl waits. The dust has resettled in all its usual corners. But something's different. The air feels like it's holding its breath. The priest begins his routine anyway. One last sweep. One last chant. One final bowl of water placed beneath the feet of a god who never asked for it. He doesn't rush. He doesn't linger. He performs each motion like punctuation in a sentence no one reads anymore. You help where you can. Folding old cloths. Gathering dried offerings. Straightening what no longer needs straightening. There's no ceremony for shutting a temple down. No prescribed rite for ending devotion. Just hands doing familiar work one more time. When the sun is higher, the priest walks to the door. He turns back just once and nods not to you, not to the god, but to the room itself, as if to say, we did what we could. He closes the wooden shutters. They creak louder than usual. You wonder if it's the wood protesting, or the air adjusting to absence. The final act is locking the door. It's not a grand lock. just a thick wooden bar placed across the threshold, slid into iron brackets that still remember how to hold. You help him lift it into place. It thuds into position like a drumbeat no one dances to anymore. He sighs, not deeply, just enough. Then he walks away, sandals whispering against the stone path, hands empty, posture straight. You remain a moment longer, listening, not for gods, not for ghosts, just for the sound of stillness taking root. You turn, step outside, pull the door closed behind you. It does not lock loudly, but it locks completely. As the night deepens and the world outside fades to a muted hush, you find yourself lingering in the quiet that once housed gods and priests. The temple is still, the heavy stone breathing a slow, endless sigh that carries with it centuries of whispered hopes, forgotten prayers, and the steady rhythm of absence. The incense has burned down to ashes, the offerings have crumbled, and the doors stand locked not with defiance, but with a solemn grace that says, "This is enough for now." You take a slow breath, the kind that stretches long and wide, as if trying to fill every corner of your being with the calm that surrounds you. The shadows fold gently over the walls, settling like an old friend who knows the stories but chooses silence. The weight of the past presses lightly, not to suffocate, but to remind you of the delicate balance between presence and void. Thank you for staying until the end, for walking this path through stone and silence, through hope and quiet resignation. I hope you found comfort not in the treasures that were never here, but in the stillness that holds space for all the stories left untold. When you return, the pyramid will be waiting unchanged, unwavering, and patiently silent. Until then, may your own moments of stillness be gentle and your restless thoughts find peace in the spaces between. And tonight, you are the one who must carry the basket once more.